was regarded as the appropriate profession for a Confucian. Confucius also included in his program of self-cultivation an educated appreciation of the refined arts, music, dance, and poetry. Music was a particular enjoyment of Confucius. He loved singing and playing the lute. As I mentioned earlier, he believed that particular kinds of music had the power to evoke and refine moral sensitivities. In this context, he's mainly thinking about music that might be performed at state occasions and in rituals, such as sacrifices and weddings and funerals. At these times, he thought the music must fit the occasion and must contribute to the general purpose of the event. Apparently, Confucius was especially sensitive to the spiritual power of music. A disciple reports, when the master was in Qi, he heard the xiao. That's a form of music that's played at a state ceremony. And for 3 months, he did not notice the taste of meat. He said, "I did not imagine that music making reached such perfection." By the same token, certain forms of music, he thought, could be a disruptive influence and could degrade our capacities for kindness and harmony. Unlike spiritual teachers of some other traditions, Confucius encouraged his followers to devote attention to the minute details of daily life. The forest samanas of the Ganges Basin in India practice a radical disregard for the things of this world. Since the world was transient, the samanas sought to attend only to that which was enduring, to the invisible and intangible soul. But to Confucius, such things as clothing and food and even one's posture were matters of spiritual significance. One of the books of the Analects contains an extensive list of rules for wearing clothes. The proper colors to wear and not wear. Mauve and purple, by the way, were out for the gentlemen. The appropriate types of material for particular seasons, and even how to fold the robes in the correct way. These regulations may seem rather tedious, but they served important purposes in the cultivation of moral character. Some of these purposes are pretty obscure without knowing the complete context, but others are more apparent. For example, Confucius told his disciples never to eat their fill in the presence of someone in mourning. Self-restriction in this case not only displays solidarity with one in grief, but the practice allows the student an opportunity to reflect on his or her common lot with the mourner and the deceased, bringing attention to the fact that we all mourn and we all die. That simple recognition helps deepen our sense of compassion and reverence for life. Wearing the proper clothing, folding them in the proper way, carrying oneself with an upright posture, suggest a respect for the society of which one is a part, and a respect for oneself. Confucius emphasized that always observing these rules should be done with the utmost humility and never to gain advantages for oneself. Although Confucius promoted attentiveness to these mundane aspects of experience, he also encouraged a kind of detachment to material possessions and things. He seemed to know, like the Buddha, that happiness is not found in acquisitions. The Master said, even in the midst of eating coarse rice and drinking water and using a bent arm for a pillow, happiness is surely to be found. Riches and honors acquired by unrighteous means are to me like the floating clouds. In this brief passage, Confucius expresses one of the major themes of the axial age religions. Happiness has nothing to do with wealth, recognition, or comfort, but everything to do with righteousness. Finally, we come to what is probably the most important dimension of self-cultivation in the Confucian view, the proper observance of Li. Li is a term with a rich history in Chinese religions. It's an ancient word that Confucius infused with new meaning. Originally, Li meant the ritual sacrifice performed for the gods and for the ancestors and for the other spirits. But Confucius transformed the concept of Li in two fundamental ways. First, he extended its meaning to refer not only to public formal occasions of ritual, but to all occasions of human interaction. Just as Shakespeare compared the world to a stage and men and women to actors, Confucius thought of the world as a temple and men and women as participants in a grand ceremony. He believed that in all our dealings with others, we ought to act and comport ourselves with all the dignity appropriate to a sacred rite. He describes the features of this dignified approach. The things which the gentleman values in the way are three. In demeanor, he banishes his violence and rudeness. In composing his expression, he keeps close to sincerity. And in the style of his utterances, he banishes coarseness and impropriety. What Confucius illustrates in this passage are examples of social etiquette or manners. And with that observation, we return to an earlier point about the meaning of the word gentleman. In the Confucian sense, the gentleman is indeed a mannerly individual. But Confucius was not interested in manners simply for the sake of appearing mannerly or even gaining certain personal advantages. Some of you may have enjoyed a British comedy of a few years ago called Keeping Up Appearances, which will air occasionally on PBS stations. The protagonist is a suburban middle-class matron by the name of Hyacinth Bucket, or Bouquet, as she announces it. Hyacinth's entire life is consumed with trying to follow the proper rules for English society. She hosts socially correct dinner parties and fusses over the right china pattern to use for afternoon tea. All the while, she drives her poor husband crazy, and her neighbors are not happy with her obsessions with etiquette as well. And she's not in the least concerned with anyone other than her beloved son, who actually never appears in the show. Her chief motivation, as the series title suggests, is to seem to be of higher status than she actually is. Thus, the program lampoons the extent to which some people will go to appear to be better than they really are. And it also illustrates how attending to proper etiquette can become a formal, sterile, and tremendous encumbrance to living a happy life. Needless to say, Confucius would not have approved of Hyacinth's distortion of the mannerly life. The very things that obsess Hyacinth would be for Confucius the acts that could make us better persons. Hyacinth's problem, from the Confucian perspective, is that she fails to observe etiquette in the right spirit. When performed with the proper inner disposition, following the rules for correct behavior has the potential to make us more humane. This was Confucius's second contribution to the understanding of Li, connecting it to moral development. In the Shang and early Zhou dynasties, Ritual was understood primarily as the performance of certain external acts. Simply going through the prescribed motions was sufficient to make the ritual effective.